The thing that really pisses me off with Tyler compared to Tashawn is they making these excuses that there's just a bunch of bad gameplay this season. That's the excuse. And yet Tashawn is able to keep himself off the block the entire game, possibly at least up to Final 3. And on Tyler's this great player, and yet he was on a season with Faute. We all know that alliance was so bad. Mistake after mistake after mistake. Bad gameplay all around to the opposition to level 6. Hell, Fessy still sucks. Hello, everybody. Welcome to The Trend. Now, I would like to eventually turn the trend into maybe a game. That's the thought, to, discuss trending topics on Twitter and Instagram and whatnot. But for this first show, and for now, I'm just going to talk. And eventually, this will be used to probably give Big Brother US updates. But eventually, I'm also just going to talk about whatever is trending. But this first show, I want to be serious. Because something has been just itching at me, pissing me off. I'm tired of it, beyond tired of it. If you don't want to hear the truth, you might as well turn this off now, because I'm just going to keep it real on this channel as much as I can. That's all I can do. The Big Brother franchise in North America is just hot garbage. Let's be real. It's hot garbage. Ratings sink now every season, whether it's US or Canada, for that matter. And before I get into these more serious discussions that I want to address with the show and its fan base in general, I do want to commend Big Brother Canada on finally deciding to have real diversity, even though they were basically forced into this because of the mistakes they made last season, which I will hopefully get into on this later. But they put Arissa on the production team. And it is a start. It is just a start, however, because for 20 years on these shows, the lack of diversity has been a huge issue, especially towards Black players. So really, this first step is just a Band-Aid on what has been a bleeding wound for 20 years, and it has a long way to go. There is this constant need from both players and fans where they overcompensate a white player's game. White players are allowed to make mistakes. They are allowed, whether in the game, because they're usually before surrounded by a bunch of white people, so it's easier for them than it is and was. So even if they play a pretty mediocre game, they get praised. If they play a bad game, sometimes they still get praised, or at least people make excuses for them. But meanwhile, Black players on these shows are usually either ridiculed or they just don't get the credit that they deserve, which is happening a lot this season, specifically with Tashawn, but also even with Brayden. And even this season, it wasn't just towards the Black players. It was also towards Kiefer, who was a minority in his own right. And people this season were just hating on Kiefer, even though he did play a hell of a game. And at first I was like, oh, yeah, this is certainly odd, but it wasn't really all that odd when you really get down to how often this happens. And the excuse for why people don't like Kiefer was, oh, he's mean, or the biggest one was, oh, he's cocky. Well, I would love for everybody to look at some of their favorite white players on either Big Brother and Survivor and how cocky they are, from Tony on Survivor to Boston Rob on Survivor to Dr. Will on Big Brother to Paul on Big Brother. All of these popular players, or at least were popular at one time, were cocky. So all the hate towards Kiefer for being cocky, very interesting, because you usually love this and enjoy this out of the white players. And it's not just the fan base. What certainly doesn't help and makes things worse are these popular podcasts. One specifically, we all know the one that is popular that gives Big Brother updates and how biased they are towards white players compared to black players, and even Kiefer at times this season. And the excuse this season was supposedly the bad gameplay. And there definitely was some bad gameplay. This is true. I'm not going to dispute that completely, but I don't think it takes away from, or should take away from, the good gameplay from the players this season who were good players at times. In our rankings, we only had 3 people rank at number 1 this entire season, and it was 3 that ended up in the final 4. It was Tashawn, Brayden, and Kiefer, who at various times during the season in our rankings ended up in the top 3, and it was deserved because at times in this game they played great. And that popular podcast and Perrin, who just licks the boots of certain white players of the past and has quite the history of doing this. If you really want to go back and look at the facts, it's true. There was a lot of love for Tyler last year on All Stars to try and overcompensate his game on All Stars, where he just basically played a combination of Tina and Rohan from this season, where he decided it was fine to play from the bottom of an alliance. He could win some challenges, but it got him nowhere. It was weak, scared gameplay. Tyler did not play good. And Tyler has been blown up as this great white player. He has been. And I'm not going to knock his game the first season too much, because he did have a way of getting what he wanted. But let's not act like he didn't have a safety net for it. Literally 2/3 of that season. And he got sloppy because of that safety net. In his first season, he had that power app where he could basically take himself off the block once in the first 8 or 9 weeks of the game, which is a long time to have a safety net in a game. Now, he didn't need to use it, but I still think just for having it, it helped him immensely because he had a freedom to play, a freedom white players in a mostly white cast already have. And so, of course, he was praised on the podcasts and praised on these social medias. But then this season, Tashawn, a black man, plays this phenomenal social game and has yet to be on the block on his own volition and is not getting the credit. Because if Tashawn was white, he would be getting praise right now. And we all know that is true because it happens every year for a white male in this game to get praise for their gameplay, even if it's mediocre like Tyler's. Now, the thing that really pisses me off with Tyler compared to Tashawn is they making these excuses that, there's just a bunch of bad gameplay this season. That's the excuse. And yet Tashawn is able to keep himself off the block the entire game, possibly, at least up to Final 3. And on Tyler's this great player, and yet he was on a season with Faute. We all know that alliance was so bad. Mistake after mistake after mistake, bad gameplay all around to the opposition to level 6. So why is Tyler such a great player, even though half of his players on a season were terrible? Really bad. And that brings me to my main issue that is happening. And that is Terrible Tara getting all this over credit for a really subpar game. Her games hasn't even been mediocre. It's been mostly bad. But she's an underdog, and people want to root for an underdog. Since when? Since when has anybody rooted for somebody that came back in a battle bag or an edge of extinction? It doesn't happen. And that's because they come back into the game against white players. Battlebacks, if they came back in the BBUS, there's usually only white players left in the game. So nobody has a reason to really like the people coming back from Battlebacks. On Survivor, Chris Underwood rightfully gets labeled as a bad winner because he was out for most of the game, came back from Edge and won. So Tara, who was a Karen for most of the season, who was microaggressive for most of the season, who clearly showed some racist tendencies for most of the season, had a terrible social game for most of the season, suddenly comes back from this bad twist. And why this twist was bad is because at least on Edge of Extinction, the rest of the players have a time to adjust to this twist. And so it kind of makes it fair in a little bit. Not really, does it? Because only those people that come back really get a second chance while nobody else does. But at least when you know that there's twists coming, you can adjust to it. This twist out of nowhere, late in the game, Tara comes back. Now suddenly people want to overcompensate her game. It's one thing to root for the underdog, but to do it like this really shows your ass, is what it does. Because Tara's game has not been good. She's getting some credit for getting out Jed. But really, Jed won the veto, and it was Kiefer's plan that got Jed voted out. Now, you could say Tara beat him in the battle back, but still, it was Kiefer's plan that got Jed out. So they want to give Tara credit for being the HOH when Jed got evicted, even though she didn't vote, and also give her the credit if she voted out Kiefer this time, which she does deserve the credit for if she voted out Kiefer. It is crazy that Tara has a chance to beat Deshaun, despite him playing this nearly perfect game. Could be perfect if he wins the final HOH. But is he going to get the credit for this game he played? Whereas Tara is getting too much credit for the game she played. Especially if she is sitting next to Deshaun. It's crazy because he's the one that got her out. So that alone really should make him the winner if you really think about it logically. So I'm just sick of it. I'm sick of it. It's not going to fly on this channel. Good gameplay is good gameplay, and bad gameplay is bad gameplay. I'm just tired of Black players not getting the credit they deserve, whether it's from the players, from juries, from whoever, the fan base, these bad podcasters, whatever. And the worst part of all brings us back to last year on Big Brother Canada, where they decided to remove a Black man, Jamar, for something he said to a white man. And suddenly the white players felt uncomfortable. So they removed him from the game. Well, this season, Tara made Tashawn feel very uncomfortable for 3 weeks straight with her microaggressions, with her rants towards him, with her rants to him about Jed. Black players have had to deal with microaggressions and feeling uncomfortable in games for literally 2 decades on Survivor and Big Brother. And yet, nothing has been done about it for 20 years. And so last season they had that controversy. Thankfully, coronavirus ended that shitty ass season because of that shitty ass production team that they have in Canada. And now, this season, we might have a Karen as a winner, and people will try and justify it. And it ain't gonna age well. So this is why Big Brother and even Survivor have a long way to go to fix this problem in the game. Hopefully it continues to go in the right direction. Don't know how much longer Big Brother Canada is going to be around with its ratings. BBUS gets saved by CBS that loves to make excuses for Big Brother instead of making the right changes it needs in production themselves. But I, for one, am tired of the fake woke. Tired of the virtue signaling in these games and by the podcasters and by the fan base. And then they fall back into the same old shit where they can't give the black players credit and they want to overcredit the white players to try and make excuses for the show, for the players, whatever. All these past house guests coming out. Don't talk shit about the players when they get out of the house. Well, they shouldn't be racist while they're in the fucking house. How about that? Why can't that be a thing? Because if they are, they're going to get called out on it. Have you been on social media? That's what it's here for these days. I guess to end this, I just needed to talk about this. I think it needs to be talked about more. I don't want to completely talk shit about Rob has a podcast. I feel like Rob does try or has been trying. I'm glad they brought in a bunch of diversity to their podcasts. But their Big Brother coverage ain't good. It ain't. Sorry. Brent is terribly missing. I know Brent has controversies of his own. And I'm not just saying that because he subscribes to this channel. Because I said on Sequester he was a terrible juror, and he was. But Brent is a good podcaster. He was the best on Big Brother podcasting from Rap. He was the only one that would actually bring up issues like this that I've talked about tonight. And this season showed bias, just like the fan base has showed bias, just like production teams have showed bias. And it's not like they even make good television. Big Brother US or Canada has not had good episodes in several seasons. Their episodes are crap. They edit together, they do a lot of fluff. It's so bad. It's not good television. So, anyway, I digress. Just hopefully this could keep going in the right direction. But people need to let go of their biases, or it never is going to. Period.